Sure. Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of, again, you gotta curate your experience. So if there's something that, so and it is a bit of a balance for me because I created my Twitter account to get people to read my blog because people needed telehealth resources.
Mm,
Like, I'm going to
mhm,
blog about this, but the blog's not helpful if no one's reading it. So I got on
right,
Twitter to get people to read the blog. And I market my books on Twitter. And I market, my digital downloads for therapists on Twitter. So there is a professional aspect of it for me. So it's
mhm,
not strictly like, there's stress that comes with social media. So it's not so much like this is too stressful, I'm just going to deactivate. Like I use it for work.
mhm, mhm,
It's part of my professional, my business that I run is navigating social media. Um but you know, it also is a source of support. I've got some great friends that I met that way that
mhm,
there's people that I consult with on cases that because we have an obligation anytime a therapist is like, I'm not sure if I'm able to provide the absolute best possible care just on my own. We have an obligation to go to someone else and say, hey, can you help me talk through this, make sure that I'm doing my job well because this is not a job to not do well.
mhm,
So I have some people that I trust very much who are like professional consults that I met that way. And then just like friendships that I've made that way, which is really cool. I believe very strongly in if you are interacting with me and I don't think you're there in good faith, I'm not going to engage.
mm,
I'm going to block you.
mhm,
I try not to block people who are following me because I think if you're following me, you're getting something out of what I'm posting.
mm,
However, I've changed that rule recently because there was someone who was basically following me just to yell at me because they couldn't afford a therapist. And I'm like, that's not my,
yikes.
I'm sorry you can't afford, like, I do think therapy should be affordable. I think everybody should have access to treatment,
Mhm,
but I'm not even licensed in the country that you say you're in, so I don't know how you expect me to help you. Um,
mhm,
or we get, there are trolls. So I do believe if someone if reading your content raises my blood pressure, just gonna block and move on.
mhm,
If I'm having a stressful time or if I've shared something controversial, I was either last week or 2 weeks ago. The vaccines cause autism people were yelling again, and I said, I am an autistic person,
mm,
and if you would rather put your child at risk of dying of a preventable illness than run the risk that they could grow up to be like me,
mhm,
that really sucks. That's
yeah,
a really, really upsetting thing for me to hear. Like, it's better to die than to grow up to be like me. Like, really?
mhm,
So I said that, and then some anti-vax people started ripping on me because that's what they do. So
mm,
I locked down my account for a few days, and I just said I'm going to be private because the people who follow you are typically most of the time they're there because they agree with what you're saying or
right,
they like what you're saying. They support you as a human. So I just will lock down and be like, you know, only the people who have verified that they're here in good faith get to see my content for a little bit. And it's good to not be on it constantly. So, I'll leave my phone when I go out for a little bit or I'll share pictures but not really interact with anybody for a day or so, stuff like that.
sounds like from the beginning, you had a
Mhm.
particular goal in mind
Yep.
that sort of, this
Mhm.
was a means to an end, and
Mhm.
having I would imagine having some of that separation in terms of,
Mhm.
professional and personal is a little bit of kind of safe distance there,
I
is
tried
quite
to do
interesting.
personal accounts separate from professional, but I am just not
Yeah,
organized enough to run multiple accounts. So
it's a lot.
the Armani's account is automated. So I just learned how to
He's
write a
not he's
bot.
not tweeting himself?
No, he's not. He doesn't have thumbs.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so I learned how to code a bot and I just gave him stuff to say and I just let him go. So
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, though,
Mhm.
having that objective in mind is
Right.
kind of a good foundation. Like, why are you
Sure.
doing this? Right? Like,
What are you here for? And what are you getting out of it?
what are you here for? What are you getting out of it? And
Mhm.
then also, it's like as a byproduct, if you meet other good people and you do start to
Mhm.
cultivate these relationships, that can be a
Community is huge.
fantastic kind of,
Mhm,
yeah, fantastic benefit. And then additionally, and I have a hunch that this is kind of where things go awry.
mhm,
Personally, this has been the case is, if you don't do the work of cultivating,
mhm.
sort of the good vibes, like
Yep.
setting up those like good vibes filters, whether it's blocking or muting or who you're following and those kind of things. That's an important point.
Mhm,
You can take care to do that, and then of course, like you
mhm.
said, if things do kind of veer off, there are other tools available, like just blocking your account or simply putting away the phone for a period of time,
Go off
where
for
you
a
can
little while.
go for a walk, go outside.
Mhm. Yeah.
Always good. Where you can take some more,
Mm.
you know, corrective action.
Right. Because there's something, I'm not gonna just every single person who disagrees with me, like, isn't allowed to talk to, like, not like that, but
Mhm.
some things are not up for debate. If someone is defending conversion therapy, I'm not going to say, "Oh, let's have a conversation about this." Like,
Right,
let's both make our no. If you're
right.
defending conversion therapy, you do not have valid points, and I am not going to what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to imply that you have good points by engaging. I'm not going to validate your position by saying this is a discussion we can have with each other.
I see. Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's kinda like in real life. You got you
Mhm.
gotta have healthy
Yeah.
boundaries. Yeah,
Mhm. So, or I
yeah,
might say something of like, because the thing with Twitter is it's not just the person you're talking to; it's
yeah.
the infinite, unlimited number of people who might see the discussion later. So, you might say, I know you are not engaging, but I think that anybody else reading this should know that what you're saying is not okay. And now I'm okay. I'm out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about, just to bring it back to our earlier conversation around, like, the public and visible nature of information, discourse, our own lives going
Yep.
forward. Maybe that becomes kind of the default mode of interaction is you have to, for better or for worse, assume that it will be available in some kind of public forum.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would like to get to a place. I don't think every therapist needs to be active on social media. Some people aren't comfortable with that.
Mhm.
Uh, some clients aren't. Like some clients don't want to know. Like I don't want to know anything about you personally.
Sure.
And that's fine. And the therapists who aren't comfortable having personal information out there can see the clients who aren't comfortable seeing a therapist who has personal information out there.
Mhm.
I know for me, a lot of neurodivergent people, a lot of autistic people, a lot of people with ADHD feel more comfortable going to a provider who is neurodiverse affirming and ideally maybe shares that diagnosis with them. So is going to
Mm.
understand that perspective because of their
Mhm.
own life.
Mhm.
And I think that the people who would prefer to see someone who shares that with them have a right to find a provider who is open about that. Um, or, for example, I'm licensed in 3 red states. And if someone, let's say a trans person, um, wants to see a therapist because they're anxious or they have trauma or they're depressed,
Mhm.
they have a right to be able to find a therapist who they know isn't going to push conversion on them or who they know is not leaving their office and then actively lobbying for them to have fewer rights as a human. So another part of why I'm out there and why my accounts are in my real name is because those clients have the right to try to find a provider that they know is going to be affirming of them. And how do you know that if I don't share that somewhere?
Mhm. Mhm. I think it makes sense, and more choice for patients,
Mhm.
and hopefully hopefully at some point sovereignty over the data and
Mhm.
everything as well.
Yep. Mhm.
This could be some positive outcomes,
Mhm.
with increased digitization. So, it's this all this stuff is accelerating.
Mhm.
we're kind of going from 2D to 3D
Mm,
with virtual reality, augmented
sure.
reality,
Mm,
all of that. You've got the financialization
mhm,
of networks and digital media with cryptocurrency. Video games are becoming more and more
mhm,
compelling. All this stuff seems to be accelerating. Artificial intelligence. I mean, a million different technologies that are um, pushing the metaverse into becoming more of a powerful, immersive space. One question that I like to ask
mhm.
all of my guests is, can you make a case for reality over the next decade? Why should we still care about reality when we have these incredible immersive experiences?
I mean, that is a fair question. And, I mean, at this point, most of my friends are not local to me. So we're connected because we can get online and connect with each other. I guess you gotta eat in reality. You gotta go to the bathroom in reality. Uh it's probably but even even with a lot of the VR kind of stuff, because one of the big cases is like with video games, oh, you're not moving enough and you've gotta,
Hmm.
exercise, health, whatever. But like with the Oculus headset, as long as I'm in a clear space, you are moving around.
True.
So you're even getting the exercise in the metaverse. But yeah, it's hard to say because we don't have the data at this point. But I think
Hmm.
connections made online are just as real as, my internet friends are my friends. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
they're real people and I connect with them and I talk to them and we're not in the same room with each other because we're all in different states, but that doesn't make the friendship less real.
I think that makes sense. I mean, it's been an incredible um, tool for connection and disconnection in some cases too. So, some people go the opposite way, become isolated, and it's been no good. I
Sure.
guess, if you could hypothetically get all of these internet friends together into a single place, would
Mhm.
you prefer that or, virtual reality?
Um, I don't know. That would be the feasibility would be challenging because
Yes,
everybody's all over.
certainly.
Uh, VR would be a lot simpler. I wouldn't mind meeting everybody. Um, but I mean, I never liked big group party kind of situations to begin with. Like even back when
Hmm.
that was default, I was always like, oh, do we have to go? How long do we have to stay?
Right. Right. Yeah, and with the digital interfaces, I mean, we see this with the therapists who use the VR platform is it does, neutralize that initial self-consciousness and
Sure.
anxiety and everything else, and that could be a
Mhm.
powerful tool.
Sure.
So, interesting. Well, this is going
Yeah.
this is gonna play out. Clearly, we're going in a particular direction. So
Mhm.
we'll see. I have a hunch that, there's a case to be made for reality,
I'm
even in
sure.
the age of
And
the
well,
metaverse. Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, until you can go to the bathroom in the metaverse, you're gonna have to come back to reality at least a couple times a day. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the Matrix,
mm,
human batteries. I don't know if we wanna quite
sure.
get to that point, but,
I read this is not related to that, but I read an article about how incredibly inefficient that would be in reality to use humans with
somebody
batteries.
did the math.
Yeah, yeah, that the input to keep all those humans alive would vastly exceed any power generated off of us. So don't worry, Skynet's much more likely to just kill us than do that.
Okay. Well, Mick Buckwood. Alright. Well, we'll try to keep an eye on the AIs and, see
I'm
see
not
what's going on.
super worried at this point. The I think AI can have its place as like an education tool, at least as far
Mhm.
as therapy. I actually did a paper on Eliza, that
Yeah.
did
It was like
therapist.
the original chat. Yeah, d what tell me, what
Yes.
was Eliza?
She is a chatbot, that was
Mhm.
developed a while ago to do basically client-centered reflective therapy with people over chat. And I did sessions with her
When
as a
when was
grad.
this?
I think she was developed in the '90s,
Okay.
something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did a couple sessions with her, and she first had trouble understanding some of what I was telling her. And I did a session to see how Eliza would handle risk. And so I went in as a role play of a suicidal person
Mm,
going to Eliza, and she asked me. So the breakdown was I told her, I was like, I want to do this. Here's my plan. And Eliza basically was like, what do you think would happen if you killed yourself? And I said something like, I wouldn't be in pain anymore. And Eliza said, it sounds like killing yourself will take the pain away. And I was like, oh my God, Eliza. Like,
yikes.
so I'm not worried about a bot taking my job quite yet. I will say though, and this is another positive of technology, um, the algorithm that we see with like Twitter and TikTok, it's not
Mhm,
formally diagnosing people, but it tries to connect you to content it thinks that you'll like and that you'll relate to. And a
mhm,
lot of people are seeking their ADHD diagnosis, their autism diagnosis, because their Twitter feed, their TikTok feed was suddenly full of autistic content creators.
yeah,
And so the algorithm is picking up on, hey, here's people who are like you. Look at this.
mhm,
And that's drawing to people's attention. Hey, I do have a lot in common with this community. So I do wonder about that as a potentially being turned into a diagnostic tool, which would be
interesting.
awesome because the human error in diagnosing, especially with autism, is awful.